Hello everyone, welcome back to the Majjhima Nikaya Summary plus Practice series. Lesson 4, the Discourse on Fear and Dread, Majjhima Nikaya 4. Today we're going to explore the fourth discourse in the Majjhima Nikaya, known as the Discourse on Fear and Dread, or Bhayabherava Sutta. This discourse took place in the country of Kosala. In it, the Buddha shared with the Brahmin Jani some of his own experiences from before his enlightenment, during the period when he was still searching for the highest truth and the end of suffering. Back then, many people believed that deep forests, cemeteries, and remote wilderness areas were filled with frightening spirits or mysterious forces. Such places were often associated with danger, uncertainty, and the unknown. Even dedicated spiritual practitioners often felt uneasy living alone in these environments. Spending a night in the forest was considered a serious test of courage, endurance, and determination. Using his own experience as an example, the Buddha explained why fear arises, what makes it stronger, and how it can be overcome. Although the discourse talks about fear in the forest, its message goes far beyond that setting. Its teachings apply to all kinds of fear that people experience in everyday life, whether fear of failure, rejection, loss, uncertainty, illness, or death. The Buddha observed that many people become afraid when they're alone in quiet and isolated places. During the day, everything may seem normal and harmless, but at night, when visibility decreases and the mind becomes more active, even a falling leaf, a moving branch, the call of a bird, or the sound of an animal passing nearby can trigger anxiety and panic. However, the Buddha discovered something very important. Fear does not come entirely from the outside world. External events may trigger fear, but the real source of fear is within the mind itself. When the mind is disturbed by greed, hatred, delusion, guilt, worry, regret, or negative imagination, it becomes much more vulnerable to fear. The mind begins to create stories, assumptions, and worst-case scenarios. In other words, fear often tells us more about the condition of our mind than about the situation around us. Because of this, the Buddha emphasized that the first step in overcoming fear is living an ethical life. When a person lives honestly, avoids harming others, and acts with integrity, the mind tends to be lighter and more peaceful. There's less guilt, less regret, and less inner conflict. As a result, such a person can remain calmer when facing difficult situations and unexpected challenges. On the other hand, someone who frequently engages in harmful actions may appear confident on the outside, but when alone, memories, guilt, and worries can create inner unrest. The mind becomes its own source of discomfort. The Buddha also encouraged the cultivation of wholesome qualities, such as diligence, mindfulness, humility, simplicity, contentment, and freedom from laziness and carelessness. These qualities strengthen the mind, improve mental clarity, and reduce the influence that fear can have over us. One of the most powerful parts of this discourse is the Buddha's description of how he dealt with fear during his solitary practice in the forest. Whenever fear arose, he did not run away. If fear appeared while he was walking, he continued walking until the fear faded. If he was standing, he remained standing. If he was sitting, he stayed seated. If he was lying down, he remained lying down. He refused to change his posture simply because fear had appeared. This is remarkable because the Buddha did not try to suppress fear or force himself to be calm. He did not distract himself or seek comfort elsewhere. Instead, he stayed present with the experience. He allowed fear to arise, observed it carefully, and did not let it control his actions. Through this direct observation, he realized that fear is simply a mental state. It arises, remains for a while, and eventually passes away. Like all conditioned phenomena, it is impermanent. It is not permanent, and it does not define who we are. By facing fear instead of escaping from it, the Buddha came to understand its true nature. Rather than feeding it with imagination and resistance, he observed it with patience and wisdom until it naturally disappeared. This discourse teaches us that fear is a natural part of human life. Everyone experiences fear, anxiety, uncertainty, or insecurity when facing the unknown. The goal is not to become someone who never feels fear. The goal is to understand fear so that it no longer controls us. The Buddha also showed that true courage does not mean being fearless. True courage means remaining clear-minded and wise even when fear is present. A wise person neither blindly follows fear nor pretends it doesn't exist. Instead, they observe it calmly, learn from it, and respond wisely. Another important lesson is that inner freedom comes from facing ourselves honestly. Many fears continue to trouble us not because they are truly powerful, but because we keep avoiding them. The more we run away, the larger they seem to become. Avoidance gives fear room to grow. The more we face it with mindfulness and understanding, the weaker it becomes. For this reason, the discourse highlights the close connection between ethical conduct, mindfulness, and mental stability. As our actions become more wholesome and our minds become more mindful, concentrated, and clear, fear gradually loses its power. We become better able to face life's uncertainties with calmness, confidence, and resilience. So, in summary, the discourse on fear and dread teaches that overcoming fear requires three things: ethical living, mindfulness, and the willingness to face difficult emotions directly. Through awareness, patience, perseverance, and right understanding, the mind becomes stronger, freer, and more peaceful. That's all about the teaching. Let's move on to the practice.
Hello, everyone. Now let us look at some practical applications of this teaching and see how we can apply it in our daily lives. First, try to live honestly and ethically. When we avoid harming others and act with integrity, the mind becomes lighter and more peaceful. Ethical conduct creates a foundation of self-respect and inner confidence. Second, learn to recognize fear when it arises. Instead of reacting immediately, pause and simply acknowledge, fear is present in my mind. This simple act of awareness creates space between you and the emotion. Third, don't automatically run away from what frightens you. If the situation is safe, stay with the experience for a little while. Observe your breathing, relax your body, and notice what is happening in your mind. Often, fear becomes stronger because we resist it. Fourth, practice mindfulness every day. Even a few minutes of mindful breathing or mindful daily activities can help train the mind to remain calm, balanced, and less reactive during difficult moments. Fifth, start by facing small fears. Speaking in public, admitting mistakes, asking difficult questions, or learning something new can all become opportunities to build courage and confidence. Sixth, be careful not to feed fear with negative thinking. Often, fear grows because the mind creates stories about what might happen rather than focusing on what is actually happening right now. And finally, remember that courage develops gradually. Nobody becomes fearless overnight. Every time you recognize fear without letting it control your actions, you become a little stronger and more stable. As beginners in Buddhism, we don't need to live in deep forests or seek extreme challenges like practitioners in ancient India. Simply living ethically, practicing mindfulness, and facing our fears with wisdom is already a meaningful application of this discourse. As the mind becomes more stable, concentrated, and purified, fear naturally begins to fade. In its place arise peace, confidence, emotional balance, and inner freedom. Conclusion. The central message of this discourse is simple yet profound. Fear is not overcome by running away from it. Fear is overcome by understanding it. Through ethical conduct, mindfulness, and steady perseverance, the Buddha demonstrated that even our deepest fears can be transformed. When we learn to face fear with wisdom rather than react to it blindly, we gradually discover greater strength, peace, confidence, and freedom within ourselves. And that is why the teachings of the Discourse on Fear and Dread remain just as relevant today as they were more than 2,500 years ago. They continue to offer practical guidance for anyone seeking a calmer mind, a braver heart, and a more peaceful life. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again in the next lesson.